In Villisca, Iowa, at the end of a quiet street sits an old white frame house. Further up are a group of churches and a park across from a middle school a few blocks away. The house looks like many others in the neighborhood, but this one is abandoned. There is no light or sound, and looking closer, you see that the doors are tightly boarded up. Out front is a small sign that reads Villisca Axe Murder House. The house was once filled with life, but that life was harshly snuffed out on a warm summer night in 1912. A mysterious stranger broke in and savagely bludgeoned its 8 sleeping occupants. It became known as the Villisca Axe Murders, and it would baffle law enforcement for more than a century. On the night of June 10th of 1912, the Moore family was asleep in their beds. Joe and Sarah Moore were upstairs in bed, and their 4 children asleep in a room down the hall. 2 girls, the Stillinger sisters, were sleeping over in a guest room on the first floor. A little after midnight, a stranger entered an unlocked door. This was not an uncommon sight in this small, safe, friendly town. This person grabbed an oil lamp from a nearby table, setting it low so only the light was for one person. In one hand he held the lamp, in the other he held an axe. They ignored the sleeping girls downstairs and made their way upstairs. Guided by a little light from the lamp, they had an unnerving knowledge of the house's layout. They crept past the room with the girls sleeping and made his way into the bedroom of Mr. and Mrs. Moore. Then he made his way back to the floor-sleeping girls' room and then back down to the girls downstairs. In each room he committed one of the most heinous crimes in United States history. As quickly as they arrived, they left, taking the house keys and locking the door behind them. The murders may have been quick, but they were horrifying. The following morning, after noticing a lack of activity in a normally rambunctious house, the neighbors were suspicious. They contacted Joe's brother and he came to take a look. He became sick upon unlocking the door with a key of his own and saw what was inside the house. All of the occupants had been bludgeoned beyond recognition. While investigating, the police determined that the parents had been murdered first, with a lot of force. The axe swung so high above the killer's head that it cut gouges into the ceiling above the bed. Joe had been hit at least 30 times alone. The faces of the parents and of the children were now nothing but a bloody pulp. The police searched the house and found that the state of it wasn't the most concerning part. After committing the murders, the killer apparently set up some kind of ritual. He covered the parents' heads with sheets and the children's faces with clothing. Then he went and covered all the mirrors and windows in the house with clothing and towels. At some point in time, he took a 2-pound piece of bacon from the fridge and placed it, along with a keychain, in the living room. A bowl of water was found with spirals of blood in it. Police think that the killer washed his hands before leaving. By the time that police, coroner, minister, and many doctors had thoroughly looked through the crime scene, word had spread and a large crowd had formed outside. Officials warned the townspeople from going inside, but once it was cleared, at least 100 people gave in to their morbid curiosity and walked through the blood-spattered house. One townsperson even took a fragment of Joe's skull as a keepsake. As for who carried out these vicious murders, the police had few leads. They made a few half-hearted attempts to search the town and surrounding countryside. Many officials believed that he would be long gone, with him having a roughly 5-hour head start. They brought in bloodhounds, but there was no success since the crime scene had been wrecked by the townspeople. Over time, a few suspects were named, but none panned out. Frank Jones was the first. He was a local businessman who competed with Joe Moore. Moore used to work for Jones in the farm equipment sales business until he left and started his own rival business. There was a rumor that Joe was having an affair with Jones's daughter-in-law, but there was no truth to this. The townspeople state there was deep hatred between the Moores and Joneses, but none claim it was bad enough to commit murder. The second suspect was deemed more likely, even confessing to the murders, but recanted, claiming police brutality. Lynn George Jacqueline Kelly was an English immigrant who had mental problems and a history of sexual deviancy. He admitted to being in town that night and leaving the next morning. He was small and had a meek personality, so many people doubted his involvement, but police believed he was the perfect candidate due to certain factors. Police stated that the blood splatters determined that the killer was left-handed, which Kelly was. He supposedly had a history with the family, since many people had seen him watching them while at church and out and about. A dry cleaner in a nearby town said that he received bloody clothes from Kelly a few days after the killings. He also supposedly tried to access the crime scene by posing as a Scotland Yard officer. After a long interrogation, he signed a confession. He immediately recanted, and a jury wouldn't indict him. For years, the police looked into every possible scenario that could have caused this. Was it a single attack or part of a larger string of murders? Which was more likely, a local perpetrator or a traveling killer? Soon after, reports popped up with similar crimes around the country. Most were not as gruesome, but all had two common elements: an axe as the murder weapon and an oil lamp set to burn extremely low. Despite the commonalities, no connection could be made. The case ran cold, and the house was boarded up. No changes to the original layout was made, nor was a sale ever attempted. Now, the house is a tourist attraction. It sits at the end of a quiet street, while life goes on around it, despite the atrocities committed within. Thanks for joining me. If you like this video, hit that like and subscribe button, and comment down below, and I'll see you next time.